Hello everyone, welcome back to International Trade Finance. You're still with me, Freddy. Now, in this session, we're going to discuss the last part of the method of payment, and that will be documentary credit, alternatively known as the letter of credit. But before we start, I would like first to remind you of what we've covered so far. In our previous session, we discussed three methods of payment, that is, advanced payment, open account, and documentary collection. Now let me take you quickly through the three methods. Number one, advanced payment. In this method, we saw that the exporter guarantees payment, that is, he will send goods and documents altogether to the importer only after he has confirmed payments. So that is to say, this method poses no risk to an exporter at all, but to the importer. Then we skip to the second method, and that is open account. Under this method, we saw that an importer requires goods and documents to be sent to him before he could make payments. So again, that is to say, this method poses no risk to the importer but to the exporter. And that being the reason, they propose documentary collection, of which it has two forms, that is, document against acceptance and document against payment. Now, this method has a very minimum involvement of bank, and again, it does not eradicate the problem of non-payment or receiving of obsolete goods or delayment of shipment. Why? Because still there are some issues that needs to be addressed. For example, the method requires an exporter to send the consignments without a guarantee that indeed he'll get paid. On the other hand, document against payments requires the importer to make payments before he has inspected the goods. So you can see again, still the problem of non-payment, or let me put it this way, the trust issues is still there, not fully eradicated. That being said, we see that still both importers and exporter want a method that will protect their interest, and that is what brings us to the so-called documentary credit, alternatively known as the letter of credit. Now, what is a letter of credit? A letter of credit can be defined as a commitment by a certain bank to a seller or to exporter. And what commitment is that? What does this commitment stand for? Under the letter of credit, the issuing bank guarantees to make payments to the exporter only and if only the exporter will meet the terms of the letter of credit. That is, if the exporter has entered into a deal with a certain importer to sell specified amount of goods during a given time, then as long as the exporter will fulfill his contractual obligations as per the agreement, the issuing bank agrees to make payments. On the other hand, before the issuing bank could issue the letter of credit, first it will analyze thoroughly the credit application filed by the importer. So I should also inform you that a letter of credit simply means a credit facility offered by bank to an importer who will want to purchase goods or services from a certain exporter. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's discuss the parties to a letter of credit. The first party is known as the issuing bank or establishing bank. The issuing bank or establishing bank refers to a bank to which the importer will go over and apply for a letter of credit in favor of the exporter or the seller. So this is the bank that will later on make payments to the exporter should he concur to the terms under the credit. Now, this bank, after issuing the letter of credit, it will send the information to the exporter through his correspondent bank, which will discuss it later on. And that bank is the advising bank. So what is advising bank? Advising bank, this is the bank that will receive information from the issuing bank and advise the exporter. And what kind of information will this bank receive? It's the information or instructions regarding the issued letter of credit by the issuing bank or establishing bank. So issuing bank and advising bank, they correspond with each other. That is to say, once the issuing bank has issued a letter of credit or the credit, it will remit this information to the advising bank, which will notify and advise accordingly the exporter. Now, in some circumstances, it might happen that the exporter really wants a guarantee that indeed payments will be made, and just in case that an issuing bank failed to make payments, there should be another bank to guarantee payment. In that setting, the third bank will be brought into the picture, and that is confirming bank. Confirming bank refers to the bank at the request of the issuing bank that will add its own confirmation or its own commitment undertaking to honor the letter of credit just in case the issuing bank failed to do so. So, confirming bank serves as the guarantor of the issuing bank. It guarantees that in case the issuing bank failed to make payments, then confirming bank will make the payments to the exporter. And the last part to the letter of credit is the exporter, who happens to be the beneficiary or the seller. This is the person who will be paid if he will fulfill all conditions mentioned under the letter of credit. So the exporter is the one who will sell the goods to the importer. Importer will apply for a letter of credit at the issuing bank or establishing bank. Then the issuing bank will notify the exporter through the advising bank. Remember, these banks correspond to each other. And in case the exporter fulfills all terms of the credit, then he will get paid by the issuing bank. However, if the exporter feels that the letter of credit needs to be secured, he can request the issuing bank to ask another bank to guarantee payments, and there is where confirming bank will come into the picture. Now let's skip to the forms of documentary credits. Ladies and gentlemen, we have seen that under the documentary credit or letter of credit, the issuing bank guarantees to make payments to the exporter only and if only the exporter has fulfilled the terms of credit and submit documents, the required documents, on time. But we need not forget that the applicant of the documentary credit is the importer or the buyer. So, under the forms of documentary credit, we see that the first form is known as the revocable credit or revocable documentary credit. Now, since the importer is the one who applies for a letter of credit, under the revocable credit, the importer can cancel, can make amendments or modifications without the consent of the exporter or the beneficiary. So in this setting, you can see that revocable letter of credit does not really save the interest of the exporter, simply because at any given time the importer or the buyer can approach his bank to make modifications or even to cancel the letter of credit while the exporter has begun procurement or manufacturing of the goods in question. Another form of documentary credit is the irrevocable credit. Now, irrevocable credit refers to a letter of credit that requires the consent of the issuing bank and the beneficiary before any amendments or cancellation can be made. That is to say, unlike the revocable credit where an importer who is the applicant can make cancellation or modification without the consent of the exporter, with the irrevocable credit, the importer really needs to seek the consent of the issuing bank as well as the exporter before he could make any changes to the letter of credit. And that is to say, now, if it happens that you come across a letter of credit that does not state whether it is irrevocable or irrevocable, then by default it is irrevocable credit. Now, a letter of credit, whether it is irrevocable or revocable, can be confirmed or unconfirmed. Remember, under the parties of letter of credit, we discussed the issue of the confirming bank. Now, if a third-party bank has decided to guarantee that it will honor the letter of credit in case of non-payment by the issuing bank, then that is what we call a confirmed letter of credit. So that is to say, a confirmed letter of credit refers to a letter of credit at which a third bank has added its own commitment or undertaking to pay the letter of credit in the case of non-payment. On the other hand, there is what we call unconfirmed letter of credit. Unconfirmed letter of credit refers to a letter of credit which has no any undertaking or any commitment, a guarantee from a third-party bank. That is to say, it's only the issuing bank that promises to pay the beneficiary. So the difference between these two letters of credit is that unconfirmed credit, it's only a single bank, and that is the issuing bank promising to pay the beneficiary, and that is the exporter. While the confirmed letter of credit, there is a third-party bank that guarantees to pay the exporter, who is the beneficiary, just in case the issuing bank has failed to meet its obligation as per the contract. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, in case the exporter deems that he is trading under high-risk environment or with familiar parties, then it is much better to go for the confirmed letter of credit. That being said, I can confidently conclude by saying that the best letter of credit should be the confirmed irrevocable letter of credit. That is the letter of credit that will best serve the interest of both parties, exporter and importer. This kind of letter of credit guarantees that indeed the exporter will get paid and the importer will get what they are paying for and on time. The first letter of credit is known as the transferable letter of credit. Transferable letter of credit simply means a letter of credit which allows the seller to transfer all or part of the proceeds of the original credit to a second beneficiary. This type of letter of credit must be irrevocable and can only be transferred once. This type of letter of credit is suitable if it happens that the middleman obtains goods from suppliers and sells them immediately to the buyer. So that is to say that the person who has negotiated the deal is not the actual person who will really supply the goods. Probably that person who has negotiated the deal is the middleman, and so he intends to procure the goods from another supplier. Now, since he knows that another supplier will want to be paid, will want an assurance that indeed he will get paid beforehand, then the middleman will convince the applicant of the letter of credit to open a transferable letter of credit so that the part of the proceeds could be transferred to the person who will supply the goods and part to the middleman himself. So the transfer should be in accordance with the terms and conditions of the original letter of credit, except for the name and address of the beneficiary, amount of the credit. Remember, I have already mentioned that this type of letter of credit transfers a certain amount to someone else, and therefore this letter of credit will split the amount in question according to the agreement. And even though it is the applicant who will apply for this letter of credit, but actually he will get some directives from this middleman. And again, the validity of the shipment and the validity of the period of the letter of credit will not be the same as of the original letter of credit. The next type of the letter of credit is the back-to-back letter of credit. Back-to-back letter of credit is somewhat similar. However, there is slight change in its operation. Again, back-to-back letter of credit is convenient if the person who supplies the goods is different from the person who has negotiated the deal. That is to say, again, there is a middleman in this transaction. However, this middleman now is not qualified to get unsecured credit. But since the bank at which the letter of credit will be paid at has an assurance that indeed the letter of credit will be honored should this particular middleman honors the deal of the trade, then it can allow for a new letter of credit to be opened on the strength of the original letter of credit. So we say that back-to-back letter of credit are two individual letters of credit that together offer an alternative to a transferable letter of credit. And this one now will involve two separate transactions. It's like that several participating banks will be involved, and since there are too many banks involved, then the risk of confusion and dispute is high. And to protect itself, a bank generally will require that the exporter present all relevant documents that are part of the first letter of credit before issuing the second letter of credit. This is to ensure that indeed it will get paid. So the terms of the letter of credit, that is the second letter of credit that will be opened on the strength of the original letter of credit, will be the same except for the price per unit of the consignment in question, date of shipment. Remember, here you do not want the beneficiary to delay shipping the goods simply because the original letter of credit will expire. That being the reason, you'll want the back-to-back letter of credit to mature earlier or to expire earlier than the original letter of credit. Another type of letter of credit is the revolving letter of credit. The revolving letter of credit provides the amount to be renewed or reinstated without the need to renew the credit itself. The credit can revolve in respect to time or amount. Let me narrate this by giving you an example. Let's assume that you have Company A, which happens to be a supplier of Company B. And Company A has entered into a contract to supply Company B on quarterly basis, that is 4 times in a year. In that setting, there's no need for Company B to open letter of credit every time it wants to procure the goods or the services of Company A. Rather, it can go for the revolving letter of credit. That is, the letter of credit can be reinstated. Instead of opening a new one, you can use this revolving credit, and it can revolve with respect of time, I've already mentioned, on quarterly basis, or with respect to the amount. For example, if in the first quarter the amount is different from the amount that will supposed to be paid in the second quarter, then still the revolving letter of credit can serve the purpose. Usually, the arrangement limits the number of times the buyer draws down its line of credit over a predetermined period. The next type of the letter of credit is the Red Cross letter of credit. Now, before we discuss the Red Cross credit, first let's remind ourselves the definition of the letter of credit. A letter of credit, a written undertaking or commitment by the issuing bank to pay the beneficiary, that is the exporter, the maximum amount of the credit, provided that he fulfills all obligations or he fulfills all conditions stated at the letter of credit. So that is to say, the beneficiary will be paid only and if only they meet their contractual obligations. And that is, he is supposed to ship the goods as agreed and submit all required documents. But not all the time the supplier will have sufficient cash to procure raw materials and manufacture the goods. Or he might be able to procure and manufacture goods but fail to meet some other costs, for example, to pay for export fees or to pay for shipment. In that setting, instead of approaching the bank to ask for an overdraft or any other short-term credit facility, he can request the applicant, and that is the buyer, to authorize a certain percentage of the entire amount to be paid upfront in order for the beneficiary or the exporter to be able to meet those costs. And if the importer consents, then he can apply for the Red Cross letter of credit. So with this type of letter of credit, the beneficiary will receive an advanced amount, and the advanced amount will be the percentage of the total value of that particular credit. So that is to say, the rest of the amount will be paid later on. And another type is the standby letter of credit. Now, the standby letter of credit is there to guarantee payments in case of non-payments under the open account. So probably before we discuss even further, let me talk you through quickly about the open account. The open account method of payments requires the exporter to send goods and afterwards all documents to the importer before he could get paid. Now, if the exporter needs this type of arrangement to be secured, he can request the buyer to apply for a standby letter of credit. And the standby letter of credit, it works the same as your standby generator. Remember, the standby generator works only when there is power outage. But if there is power, then the standby generator will remain idle. And so is the standby letter for credit. Under the open account arrangement, if it happens that on maturity, once the importer has received goods and documents, he meets his contractual obligation, and that is, he pays the exporter on time, then standby letter of credit won't be necessary. However, if it happens that the exporter has fulfilled his contractual obligation while the importer has defaulted, then the exporter can take the documents to the issuing bank. The exporter can take the documents to the advising bank, which will forward to the issuing bank claim for payments to be made. And once the document has been received, the issuing bank will make payments. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's turn the focus of the discussion on the operation of the documentary credit. Remember, a letter of credit has four parties. Number one is the exporter, who is the seller and the beneficiary of the letter of credit. Number two is the advising bank. The advising bank is the bank that will advise and will notify the beneficiary or the exporter about the terms of the letter of credit, and that is after receiving a notification from the issuing bank. Advising bank is usually located in the country of export. Next is the importer himself. This is the buyer and the applicant of the letter of credit, and he will apply a letter of credit at the issuing bank. So that is to say, the issuing bank is located in the country of import. It is the bank where the importer will go over and apply for the letter of credit, and upon a thorough analysis of the importer, then the issuing bank will issue a letter of credit and notify the advising bank. So it is the issuing bank that is promising to pay the exporter in case the exporter has fulfilled his contractual obligations as per the terms of the letter of credit. And another part is the carrier. So the carrier can be the shipping line, truck company, or the lorry company, even the airliners. But that is to say, the carrier is supposed to transport goods or the consignment in question from the country of export to the country of import. Now, the operation starts like this. First, exporter and importers will reach into an agreement, and the agreement will be on the price of the goods, terms of payments, methods of settlements, delivery date, documents to be produced, and any other issues as per the needs of both the exporter and importer. Now, if the agreement requires payments to be made using the documentary credit or letter of credit, then the importer will approach the issuing bank and applies for a letter of credit. Now, if the issuing bank is fully satisfied with the financial soundness or financial health of the importer, it is then and only then it will issue the letter of credit and inform the advising bank. Once the advising bank has been informed, it will notify the exporter that a certain bank at the country of import has issued a letter of credit in your favor. For you to be paid, you're supposed to fulfill 1, 2, 3, 4 according to the terms of that letter of credit. If the exporter agrees that the terms of credit really meets their agreement, it is then and only then he will send goods to the transport company or the carrier, and as the evidence of receiving goods and the contract of carriage, the carrier will supply the exporter with the bill of lading. Remember, besides serving as the evidence of carriage and receipt of goods, the bill of lading is a document of title. Therefore, the exporter will compile the bill of lading plus any other required documents as per the agreement and submit them to the advising bank, which will subsequently forward the documents to the issuing bank upon examination. Once the issuing bank has received these documents, again it will re-examine them to ensure that they comply to the terms of the credit and that there is no any discrepancy or inconsistency. And if everything is intact, then the issuing bank will release the documents to the importer, who will go over to the shipping agents and claim for the goods, while in the meantime the issuing bank will raise funds to the advising bank, which will subsequently credit the account of the exporter. So you see now, this is how the letter of credits work. Examination of documents. I have mentioned under the operation that once the documents have been released to the advising bank will examine and later on forward them to the issuing bank. Remember, it is the issuing bank that has the responsibility to make payments, and therefore the issuing bank really needs to re-examine the document to be sure that they comply with the documentary credit. Now, things to look on are such as the expiry date, that is, the documents needs to be within the time of the credit. If the credit has expired, then nothing can be done. Latest date of shipment as per the agreement. If partial shipment is allowed, then it has to be stated, and therefore everything will be in the documents. The description of the consignment. Remember, the applicant, that is the buyer, will approach his bank and apply for a letter of credit. And over there, he will mention whatever he is purchasing from that particular exporter. Therefore, the issuing bank needs to confirm on the bill of lading and the invoice that indeed it is about to pay for what the importer has applied for and nothing else. I should inform you that a bank is concerned with the documents and not fact. That is to say, a banker will never leave their office and go to the port or warehouse to examine the consignment. The bank or the banker will simply check the accuracy of documents to ensure that they conform with the term of the credit. If all documents are in order, the banker is obliged to make payment. But if there is any inconsistency, then the banker cannot make payment. Rather, will act accordingly in order to resolve the problem. For instance, if the documents do not conform with the agreement, even if it is a minor discrepancy, a banker needs to ensure that that discrepancy is corrected before it could make payment, and therefore it can choose to return all documents to the beneficiary, that is the exporter, for him to make correction and do the submission before the letter of credit has expired, or a banker can keep documents that are intact and return back only documents that has some problems. And again, if there are any kind of authorization or agreement that contradict what the banker understood when it comes to the treatment of the letter of credit, then the importer, who is the applicant, needs to notify the banker beforehand. Short of that, the banker is obliged to decline making payment until he has been fully informed on the agreement between these two gentlemen. For example, if partial shipment is allowed, then the importer needs to notify the bank, because failure to do so, the banker won't pay or won't honor the letter of credit under the ground that the exporter has simply shipped part of the consignment and not the entire consignment. Another example is, for instance, the use of transshipment bill of lading. Remember, the transshipment bill of lading requires the goods to be transferred from one vessel into another vessel, and in most cases the banker won't like this kind of bill of lading. And since the banker won't like this kind of bill of lading, it means the banker won't make payments as required. Ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of this brief presentation and this topic about the methods of payment. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. Should you have any concern, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Good day.